Well, what is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to a Therapeutic Edge. I have got something cool on the table. Now, recently I shared my SOG collection, and I said there was something new coming, and this is it. This, of course, is the SOG Pentagon XR LTE. That is a lot of words, and unfortunately they have shared a lot of words. Is that going to focus, or are we just going to be blurry? What are we doing? Come on now. There we go. On the blade, that's kind of a bummer. Apparently, SOG has decided to lean into the studies and observation groups, which is what SOG stands for in the first place. But they don't really need to put that on the blade, do they? Anyway, this is the LTE version. What is the difference? Well, the standard versions have steel frames. The LTE versions, much like the Terminus XR LTE here, have carbon fiber frames, which I think is just very cool. Now, it does change the way they sound on the open and the close, but that's okay. The XR, of course, is their XR lock, which is a really nice version of a bar lock. Previously, SOG used the arc lock, which I have here on this spec arc. Believe it or not, they've actually gone backwards. As you can see, it used to have SOG, which was still too much, and then just a little bit of info on the blade. And now there's a small book that you have to read, which is a little annoying. I actually got this because I have this. I sort of think of the Pentagon as a new version of the spec arc here. And you can see they're very similar in the handle. But it's not just that. I really like this handle shape a lot. This, of course... well, here you go. All right. So it turns out I just like this handle shape a bunch. That's a really good knife. What do you get with the Pentagon? Well, you get a CTS-XHP steel blade that they claim is cryo-treated. I don't know. It may or may not be an accurate thing, but I do know that my other CTS-XHP steel blades from the new SOG have held an edge exceptionally well. So I have high hopes for this one. It is a dagger style blade, although it is only sharpened on one side, which is good because I'm an idiot. I tend to put my thumb forward on the blade, and if it was really sharp, I would probably cut myself. I don't have daggers. It's not really my thing. It's got a fuller through the middle here. I'm sure somebody calls that a blood groove. I'm not going to. It is partially sharpened right there at the tip. Yeah, so this is a really sort of pokey knife. Action is very good, although it is, as I said, a little quiet. So here's a steel frame, right? And here's the... it's just got a different sound. It's got a very nice pocket clip. It's a deep carry shaped clip, but very low on the knife, which is a weird choice. As you can see, you have about that much knife sticking out, which is fine. It's not ridiculous or anything, but it is a strange choice when it's got this really lovely loop over clip. There are two things about this knife that I don't like. One, of course, is the pocket clip placement, and the other is these thumb studs work really, really well, which makes me wonder why it has a flipper tab. I get the multiple deployment is kind of a thing these days. People are really into it. I am really into it. And it's not unusual for them to do that on their XR knives. But in this case, if you look at the really nice clean lines on this old sort of classic SOG, which is a weird thing to say for a SOG, ignore the fact that it shouts SOG at you really loudly from the scale. And you look at the clean lines on the... Terrain 365 here, they could have done that. But anyway. These are about $209, which is a fair amount of money, but I have to tell you, I have a lot of knives that come in right around $200, and this is competitive with those knives in many ways. But that's a you thing. I mean, it was a me thing, and I got this on a big sale, so I paid about $100 for this knife, and at that price, this is absolutely worth it. It's just a nice addition. That was a funny little Freudian slip. Addition to my existing SOG collection. And as I said, when SOG released their sort of fancy Kiku a couple of years ago now, if they were serious about improving their image and improving their knives and producing knives that are worth owning, I'm on board. So this was an opportunity to sort of continue along in that path. I'll put a link in the description to where you can find one of these of your own if you would like. What do you get? Well, you get 3.5 inches of cutting on just a tiny bit over 3.5 inches of CTS-XHP. The grip area from behind that flipper is, it's 4 inches and a little bit. This is a really, really comfortable knife to hold. It is, as I said, basically a dagger-shaped blade. So you'll notice I keep putting my thumb up here. This is a habit I have from literally any of my other knives. My recommendation to you if you buy one of these is don't do that too much. Even though it's not sharp, it is still sharper than you may be accustomed to, and it does dig in a little bit. So this is a good knife to hold a little farther back and work, which is okay because you got edge, there's a little bit of a sharpening choil, which is nice, but you got edge pretty much all the way back. And so you're not too far away from the sharpening edge, even when you're holding it down here. The thumb studs are, because it comes so far back, into the cutting path at the very, very end of the knife. Now, it hasn't been an issue for me yet, but if you do a lot of like heavy cardboard cutting where you're right up against the scales, you might run into the thumb studs. Which brings me back to a point, which is, since the flipper tab also works really well, maybe just go with that instead of the studs. See what I'm getting? They could have picked one. It would have been fine. But hey, that's just me. What do I know? Closed length on the Pentagon XR LTE, it's, again, quite a mouthful, is 4 3/4 inches long. Overall length from tip to tail is 8 1/4, which means that it is the same length as a Sebenza. And this Terrain 365 is a little tiny bit shorter, but not much. And it makes it a little bit shorter than the old spec arc here. Right, as you can see, the spec arc is almost 9 inches. Interestingly enough, I really do think that this is the sort of grandfather to the Pentagon here. These knives are very similar in hand. Different cutting tools, of course, but you can definitely see that they reached into their past catalog for the design. I love this thing, by the way. This is VG10, and this is an old SOG. And anyway, between this and this, SOG made a bunch of knives that I wouldn't recommend to anyone for any reason. But at either end of the spectrum here, you are definitely running around with a cool cutting tool in your hands. Okay. Let's see. Let's weigh it, right? I mean, the action's good, flipper's good, pocket clip is good, overall fit and finish is good. I will say there's a little bit of, you see that? You see that at all? It wiggles just a little bit. There's a little bit of detent lash. So I can hear Lefty out there just going, no, but it doesn't bother me. You can hear it though. That is not the case on any of my other SOGs. But, I got to tell you everything I see. Other than that, this thing really came out of the box in excellent condition. And I do want to say that the grind, let's get that shine. The grind is perfect. It is exactly the same height on both sides of the blade. There's no smile down here at the end. They did a really good job in many ways. So the few little issues are not enough to steer me away. And even at $200, which, by the way, in this day and age, that's a fairly middle-of-the-road knife price in many ways. There are considerably less expensive knives. But, $200 is not crazy anymore either. Let's go ahead and weigh it out, which is what we started to do before I got all distracted. I know what I'm doing. Let's put that right there. All right. The LTE comes in at 3.2 ounces. For an 8 1/4 inch knife, that's pretty good. And that is better than an ounce per inch which a lot of the really hardcore EDC, like everyday carry guys, really like. So that's actually pretty good. Where does the that's 2.3, 3.2. Yeah, I mean, giving up the steel frame for a carbon fiber frame does save a ton of weight. It's a very slicey knife, even though it has a relatively short drop down to the edge because of the way that it is shaped. They start off with a relatively thin slice of that CTS-XHP, which, look, you got two choices if you want a really slicey knife. You either have to give it a really tall blade, so it's got a lot of room to drop down to a nice edge, or you got to start reasonably thin. I can get to the best measurement if I do that. So let's see how much of this they do give you. Right down here at where I can reach the thickest spot. Yeah, we're just under 3 millimeters of CTS-XHP. The coating on this blade looks to be exactly the same as the coating on the terminus here, and I've had this knife for a year and a half. It has been in my pocket many times. Now, this is S35VN. It's not quite the same blade steel, but the coating has held up remarkably well. Both of these knives are very well balanced. Both of them are excellent cutters. Both of them are great in the pocket. I mean, if that half an ounce or quarter of an ounce or whatever the LTE version save you isn't worth it to you, if ultralight isn't your jam, the standard version of this is a little bit less expensive and looks virtually the same. So you don't have to chase that if you don't want to. I will say that the G10 is a little, yeah, but you can get a slightly less expensive version of this with a standard steel frame for a little less money. And look, if this is your thing, and I don't know why it's mine, it wouldn't have been that long ago, but I just really dig it. If you want something that's very pokey, in case you need to give something a prod, that is very well made, very comfortable in the pocket, yeah, maybe take a look at the Pentagon series from SOG, or the Terminus series if you're looking for something smaller. I don't know. That's kind of up to you. I think of the Terminus as, look, it's a little bit heavier and a little bit smaller, actually, than the Bug Out. I know we're not talking about this knife, but the width of the handle on the XR makes it so much more comfortable for me to use than the Bug Out. So if I'm looking for ultra light, the LTE series from SOG definitely has my attention. Anyway, I appreciate you watching. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the SOG XR LTE. I guess I should start calling it the Studies and Observation Group Pentagon XR. Well, let's read the whole thing. The Studies and Observations Group Pentagon XR LTE Cryo CTS-XHP. No. The SOG Pentagon is a pretty nice knife, and coming in at right around 200 bucks. It's competitively priced with other knives with similar features, and I really like their CTS-XHP. So I'll put a link in the description to where you can find one of your own, as I've said before. I hope you've enjoyed this look at it. I know I have enjoyed adding it to my collection. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.